So today I wanted to do a video about Einkorn sourdough. I'm going to show you a recipe that I developed using the Jovial Foods dry sourdough. This is actually just refreshed sourdough. If I can find my camera, where is it? Over here. So I refreshed it on a Thursday night. Today's Friday. And this is what it looks like after I refresh it. It makes a small quantity and it's like a gummy sticky texture. It's not wet in any way. And then after it rises like this, I just throw it in the fridge and then I reserve at least 10 grams of it and use that to refresh then 1 week later. But the remainder of it, I use it to make bread, pancakes, things like that. I did develop this recipe for these sourdough pancakes because I found that the Jovial Foods version, this is what it looks like. The Jovial Foods version, I think it has butter, whole milk, a lot of like heavy extra added ingredients, and I felt like when I made it, it just was too dense and I wasn't really happy with how it turned out. So I kind of used a lot of the recipe, or looked at a lot of recipes and then used a lot of the ingredients that I found in other like sourdough recipes, and then these don't have butter or milk added to them, and I find them very light. You don't feel super dense after you eat them. A lot of times when you eat things that are really dense, you feel quite heavy and full after, and usually with einkorn in general, you don't feel that way unless you're adding a lot of extra calories to whatever it is you're eating. So anyway, this is the dry sourdough. Kind of has like a gummy tacky sort of texture. It looks like that, and this will deflate then once it goes in the refrigerator as well. So I just wanted to show you what the sourdough looks like. I will probably make pancakes later on in the week, so I'll pull my camera out and show you what I do. I make 11 the night before and let that out at room temperature overnight just to kind of ferment, and then in the morning I throw all my ingredients together and make the pancakes. So I will show you how to do that. I will link down below the instructions, or not the instructions, the link to the instructions on how to make a Einkorn sourdough starter if you're interested. Mine took a very long time to actually do something, and I will say it is quite expensive to start it from scratch because you're dumping a lot of discard away. So I personally, it's one of those things you want to make sure you're going to keep alive and not give up on. So you want to just make sure it's something that you're willing to keep doing for an extended period of time. Otherwise, I would say monetarily, it's not worth doing. But for us, we've had this starter about 6 months, I would say. So it's pretty active, and my loaves of bread rise perfectly fine and everything. In the beginning, it was quite slow. So if yours is that way, don't give up. You will get there. It just takes a lot of time and patience. So yes, I will come back with another video and show you exactly how to make the leaven and then the pancakes the following day. This second half of the video is just me making the leaven. I'm just showing you how the sourdough looks after it had been sitting in the fridge for a couple days after it had been refreshed. And I am now just gonna measure out 10 grams of the starter just to reserve it for refreshing on Thursday. I usually do mine once a week when I refresh it. So it's just me measuring it out. And this uses the whole container of the Jovial Foods sourdough starter, the Einkorn dry starter. So if you have yours established, you just basically dump the entire contents of the jar minus the 10 grams of starter that you want to use for refreshing later in the week. And this recipe makes enough pancakes for, I wouldn't say makes enough for, it makes 10 to 12 pancakes is what I'm trying to say. 10 pancakes that are a pretty decent size. And then I'm just gonna get some warm water. I do about 1 cup plus maybe an extra tablespoon. And then again, this leaven is pretty much the same leaven that you'll find in the Einkorn book that is sold on the Jovial Foods website. I think it's just doubled for the most part. So we add that into the starter, and then I just break it apart with a fork. It never really dissolves all the way. It stays kind of chunky, so don't worry about it if it doesn't completely dissolve. It's quite sticky, so it takes a minute to really work it in, and I usually do it until it's mostly broken apart and gets pretty foamy. I'm sorry this is out of focus. I didn't realize it wasn't focusing automatically, so I apologize. And this is about 6 o'clock at night. I usually mix up my leaven right after dinner, or if I need to refresh my starter, I do it right before I'm finished doing the dishes after dinner. And then I'm just showing the texture a little bit here. A little foamy and chunky still. And then to that, I use the all-purpose einkorn flour. I'm sure you could use the whole grain, just maybe use a little bit less of the whole grain flour. So I will use 2 cups of the all-purpose. So if you do sub in some of the whole grain, I'd probably do maybe 3/4 of a cup, somewhere around there. I don't use the scale for this particular part of my pancake making, or even the next part. For bread, I do use the scale though, but pancakes I don't. This is my own little recipe, so I just kind of winged it when I made the recipe. But these are really fantastic. So you just mix it all together until it looks like a tacky batter. And that's just what it looks like. Just put a lid on that, and I'll set it up where my tomatoes are there. I just leave it there for the rest of the evening and into the night, just at room temperature. I don't refrigerate it at all because I'm gonna bake with it the next day. So I'll see you in the next video then. Oh, and this is my 10 grams of starter. I'm just showing you that I'm putting it back in the jar, and I'll put that back in the fridge until Thursday when it's time to refresh. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for my dishes in the background, please ignore them. It's just after breakfast. I let my sourdough ferment overnight. So this is what it looks like after it's fermented. I'll take the lid off. I love these batter bowls. This is an Einkorn batter bowl I got from Amazon. You can see how nice and bubbly and everything is. So this is all ready to go. It does rise up quite a bit overnight, and then it deflates a little bit after a while. I usually let mine ferment. I think I did it at 6-ish o'clock last night that I mixed my leaven together, and then I let it sit until it's 8 o'clock exactly right now. So that was what, 14, 12, I don't know, can't do math. About, usually on average, I make them around 6 or so in the morning, so it usually sits about 12 hours. I guess today will be about 14. So to the leaven, I'm going to add, let me make sure I'm somewhat in focus here, because yesterday I apologize. I was going back and forth and I thought it would focus on its own, and it didn't, and we had a lot of background noise, and sorry, I didn't even pay attention to that. It was after dinner. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is add, I have a little bowl here, so I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons. This is just white sugar. You could also do honey. I have done honey, but I haven't really enjoyed the flavor as much as I do just the plain granulated sugar. And then I add a teaspoon of salt to this bowl as well. And it smells so good. It's nicely fermented. It smells nice and sour. I'm getting a little low on sea salts. So 1 teaspoon of the sea salt into the bowl. And then I do add baking soda. I don't add it necessarily for the leavening part of it. I do add it for the flavor. I've looked at a lot of recipes for, for yeast-based sourdough where you mix together yeast and flour and stuff and let that sit overnight, and it has baking soda added to it. But I've tried making just the Jovial, it's just the Jovial sourdough pancakes. I think it's in the Einkorn book, but it didn't have baking soda in it. So for me, I like the flavor of the baking soda. It's kind of like got that, you know, salty taste to it in addition to the salt. So that's why I add it. And you could probably do just fine without it if you prefer not to have the baking soda in there, because your leaven is perfectly fine. It'll rise if you have really good active starter. You should have no problem getting that to rise on your pan. But I'm gonna go ahead and add a teaspoon of baking soda. I love this little keeper. It's technically a powdered sugar keeper, but I love it for baking soda because it makes such a mess in the pantry. So that works well. So now I got all my dry stuff in here. Now what I'm gonna do is just grab like a tablespoon or so of water. It doesn't have to be exact, so let me go get that. And then I just add that to the bowl. I'm just gonna grab a little fork here and mix that together. And then we have to add 2 eggs to the mix. I'm just gonna grab my little composting. We have a compost bin out back. But I like to, I think our soil's a little calcium deficient, so I've been saving some of the shells and pureeing them and adding that to my soil. So I'm just gonna do 2 eggs. So I'm just gonna dump that into this mixture so I can beat it a little bit before it goes into the sourdough. 'Cause, you know, sourdough leaven is pretty gummy and things don't mix as well. All right, so I have 2 eggs in that. Super easy. I'm gonna get my pans preheated now at this point. So I'm just gonna turn them on. I use green pans. These are newer, so they still have their coating and they work pretty well. But you could probably use cast iron, whatever you have at home that you enjoy using. And I'm just gonna mix this together, and then we're gonna throw everything into the leaven, and then that's it. I do add blueberries to my pancakes too. We like that addition. So just plop it in. And you gotta really give it a good stir, because otherwise all the stuff will just kind of sit at the bottom here. Or you'll have one big pocket of, yeah, see how it's a little difficult to mix in, but you just gotta be patient with it and it'll come together. Whip it good. And it gets nice and foamy because of the baking soda. But you know, like I said, I'm sure it would do just fine without the baking soda, but we like it just for the flavor. And I swear this is the best sourdough pancake I've ever had. It's nice and light and fluffy. You don't feel really heavy after you eat it. You feel full but not heavy and weighed down. I think that's the point of Einkorn, is that you feel full without that bloated feeling after you eat regular bread-based all-purpose type pancakes. So anyway, you could probably also do the whole grain Einkorn with this as well. Maybe do half and half, or I think you use a little bit less of the whole grain Einkorn flour than the all-purpose version, just because I think it absorbs a little less liquid than the all-purpose does. So I think it's a little bit more dense. So you add a little bit less. So probably like a third of or 3/4 of a cup, I would say, probably of the whole grain Einkorn versus 1 cup. It's always just a little less. So this, I'm just gonna get my pans heated up and then I will bake them off. I will show you what they look like, and yeah, that is our recipe. I will put the full details of the recipe in the description box below. If you're interested, try them out, they're excellent. All right, so our pans should be hot enough. I just grab as much as I want to use and bring it on over. Dump it in. I'm gonna add a few blueberries to this. We like ours with blueberries. So these are frozen, actually. Those are those wild blueberries. You can add anything you want. Banana, chopped apple, cinnamon. I like the flavor of this. So I'm gonna do the other thing, or put another one in the other pan, I can't speak this morning, and cook them off, and I'll show you what they look like when they're all done. So I'm not 100% done making all the pancakes here, but I just want to give you a glimpse. Yes, these are real life pancakes, not Pinterest pancakes. But these, we add a little bit of blueberry action to them. So you can see they're nice and fluffy. They're nice and light. Excellent recipe. I think so far we've got 2, 4, 6 going, and I think I still have about half a batch of batter left. So around, you know, maybe I'd say 10 to 12 pancakes is what we get for this recipe. And that is using the Jovial Einkorn dry sourdough starter recipe that they have, which is the 10 grams of sourdough starter that you refresh with 30 grams of water and 60 grams of all-purpose einkorn. And then you refresh that so it sits out overnight, and then you get, I forget how much in a jar, maybe like 1/3 of a cup of the starter. And if you're not planning on making bread that week, like I don't make bread every week, I do a batch of these pancakes, and they, I save 10 grams of the starter and use that for refreshing later in the week. I just put it back in the jar. I didn't need to refresh right away. So I'll do that on Thursday, and then I just made the leaven to make these pancakes. And it's a great way to use them up, and like I said, you can freeze them, and they taste great reheated. So try it out.